Hey everyone, welcome to another Dagger video about building AI agents. This time we're going to be building an AI agent that writes new features for a demo project. This is building on the previous video, AI agents in CI, so if you haven't watched that one yet, you probably should, because we're not going to be going as deep into some of the other parts of the demo project. So first of all, when I say we're going to be writing new features, this is what the agent looks like for this demo. So it's going to take in a GitHub issue. So we're going to have a GitHub issue that describes a new feature that our project should have. We give that to the agent, which is this big box in the middle. The agent has an LLM, which is the thing generating the work, but also has a set of tools like the ability to read files, write files, and run tests. So that means that the LLM is able to use those tools and iterate over its assignment that we gave it, and keep writing code and running the tests until it's determined that, first of all, it's completed the feature, but also that our test passed. So this is really important because that means that the agent is not just generating a bunch of code that is meaningless and throws up a PR that's just AI slop and it's completely useless. It's actually been able to look at the context of our project, found the right place to write this code, and then it's been able to run the test to make sure that its new code actually passes our existing tests. And maybe it'll even write new tests to keep that coverage. And then once it's determined that it's completed this assignment and the tests are passing, it's going to create a GitHub pull request that then we can review and see the changes and then merge it if it looks good. So here's our demo project, the Greetings API, which we showed in the last video as well. So just to kind of refresh your memory, the Greetings API is a Go API and a little website front end. The API returns greetings in different languages, and the front end has buttons to see the different greetings. So what we can do now is create that GitHub issue that describes the new feature. So we have one kind of pre-filled here where we say let's add a new greeting, and let's create a new greeting that returns a greeting in let's say UK English. And then we create this. And so now we just have a GitHub issue. This hasn't started anything yet because we don't just automatically want every single GitHub issue to be fed to an LLM, right? We want some flow to say, okay, this issue is a feature that I, as a maintainer, think that it should be built. It's not like a discussion or some other thing related to the project. This is like a feature request. And so now, in order to make this kick off the agent workflow, we're just going to add the develop label, which is behind my head here. So we're going to add the develop label, and that's going to assign the issue to our agent developer. So we click on that, and now we can see the label is added. And so hopefully if we click over on the Actions tab, we will see new greeting, which is the name of our issue, and this has kicked off the develop workflow. So while that's running, it should just take a minute here, but let's look at the code that's making this possible. So if you remember from before, the Greetings API is Daggerized, and that's how we're able to run our dev loop locally and run our tests in CI, and also how our agent is able to run the tests in its own loop. So the Dagger module for this project has functions like check, test, build, lint, and so on. Now we've added a new function called develop. And this is a really small function, I think. Yeah, it fits on my one screen here. And we pass in an assignment, which is the actual task for the agent. We can optionally pass in a model if we want to use a specific model for this agent. We can see the default is Gemini 2.0 Flash. And then this gives us back a directory. So it's just a couple of steps here. We decide on the prompt, which is just this markdown file here that says you're a programmer on the Greetings API project. Here's your assignment, and then we can template that value in. And we tell it a little bit about the project and the tools it has access to. Once we have that, we create a workspace, and this is that place that we saw in the diagram with the tools, right? So it's the place where the agent can say, read this file or write this file with this content, run the tests. We dig more into this in the agents and CI video, so if you're curious about this workspace thing, then go and watch that video too. So we've got this workspace, the place for the agent to actually do the developing. And then we do the whole loop. So this is the whole box from the diagram right here in this highlighted code. So we say, give me an LLM with this model. So now we've got the brain with this prompt variable and this prompt. Here's your assignment. And then with this workspace, here's your tools. So with these lines of code, it has everything it needs to actually solve our task. And then by the time this line completes running, we're going to have the work output of that assignment. And then we return that as a Dagger directory. But this isn't enough to actually connect this to GitHub issues and GitHub pull requests. We actually want to take this function and wrap it in something that takes a few other primitives and functions just to be able to make that whole workflow possible. So we've got this function down here called develop pull request that takes in a GitHub token and issue ID. And again, optionally a model that it can feed through. And in this function, we have a Dagger module called GitHub issue with a function read. And so with this Dagger module, we're able to read the body of the issue ID that we'd passed in. So we have now the issue body, which is what we're calling our assignment. And we take that assignment and give it to our agent from that function we just looked at. We say, develop, here's your assignment, here's the model I received. Once we have that work output, again, we've got that directory of the completed work from our agent. We can say, okay, let's make a PR with that. So we determine a branch name. We just template something that's guaranteed to be unique. We use another Dagger module to create a feature branch. And so this feature branch is able to create a Git branch and push it to GitHub and create a pull request for that branch. So we're taking advantage of the existing Dagger ecosystem to give these abilities to our little agent workflow. So with this feature branch, we say this is the branch name, that's your repo, there's your token, and here's the completed work. So apply these changes to the branch. And this is what we got back from our little agent. So we've got this feature branch. We need, for our pull request, a body and a title. So for the body, we just template out a little text block that has the original assignment and the issue that was passed in. For the title, we actually do something cool here. We make another LLM using that same model and say, come up with an appropriate pull request title based on the assignment we got. It should be under 150 characters because sometimes they like to be a little wordy. Just tell me the title and nothing else. Here's the assignment. And so now with that little prompt, we have a title for a pull request. So we can pass that into the pull request function with our title and body. It already has the work. And then at this point, we should have a pull request up on GitHub that solves the original issue that we passed in. How does this happen? Well, we've got another little GitHub Actions workflow that says when issues are labeled, if the label was develop, remember that's the one we clicked that said this is the thing I as a maintainer want to get built. If the label is develop, then go ahead and run that Dagger call develop pull request function that we just looked at and pass in an appropriate GitHub token that has contents right, pull request right, permissions. For this one, remember last time for the CI agent we used Gemini. This one we're going to get Claude 3.5, and that means we have to give it an Anthropic API key. And so now whenever we create that label, it'll kick off that little function that we just looked at. So let's go back and see how it did. So we saw that was green. Here's our completed pull request. So this is the title that other prompt came up with. It's add UK English greeting endpoint to API. And remember, this was the original assignment, create a new greeting for the API that returns a greeting in UK English. So I was able to kind of twist the words on that and create something that makes sense as a PR title. And notice it has a little link that says fixes that, which means down here, our issue is linked. And if you go back to that issue, it's linked over here too. So we have the full GitHub flow all linked up here with our little agent. Let's see what it did with our code. And so in the data file for this project where it gets all of its greetings from, we have all the greetings and languages. And it looks like Claude decided that UK English hello world is hello world cheers. Good enough. An interesting thing to point out with its pull request is that there are no checks that ran on this PR, right? And so if you're not as familiar with GitHub Actions, an important thing to know about is this events that trigger workflow concept. But the main idea is that we had this action that happened when an external event happened, right? So the external event being I added a label to an issue. And so that kicked off that GitHub action, which then ran our agent that created a pull request. And so the pull request here is a result of another action happening that kicked off another workflow. And so this now won't trigger any other actions, no matter how we've configured GitHub Actions, because GitHub really doesn't want you to build in like endless recursive automation within GitHub Actions. It's really built for automating single events on your repository. There's a few ways that we could work around that for this. We could have on our agent over here, once it's done, we could do something called a workflow dispatch, where we're explicitly using the GitHub API to kick off a workflow and say, hey, I just made this PR, run the checks on it. So that's one option. We could have another like label or comment workflow on PRs where now I see this has been made. I can label and say, run the checks. So that, again, those are all ways of triggering outside actions, so you don't have like this endless automation loop that's not allowed. But the other cool thing is that, remember, this whole project is Daggerized, so I can actually just say, okay, my pull request is number 83. Let me just run these checks myself. So let's expand this a little bit. So in my terminal, I can say Dagger-M, and I'm pointing at a remote Dagger module, which is our Greetings API repo, specifically the ref pull 83 head. So 83 is our pull request ID. And so with GitHub, that means I'm going to get the head ref of this pull request, and I can just call the check function. And so now, without even running things in CI, I can just run the checks on that. And that's not specific to agents or anything. This is something that we can just do in general with Dagger and remote refs, right? Like if I'm reviewing someone's pull request that's changing documentation, I want to run the doc site instead of loading up a preview environment, I can just run this pointing at their pull request and it all works. So anyway, this should pass because that change looked pretty innocent to me. And then once it's good, we could go back and hit the merge button. So there we go. In let's see how many lines of code. In this develop function is about 20 lines, a lot of comments and white space. That's okay. We won't subtract points for that. And then in the workflow to connect all the dots from issue to LLM agent to pull request, the whole file is like 72 lines. But it's cool because we built this whole thing from scratch without using any other frameworks or any huge libraries doing the heavy lifting. We just made an agent that was able to write a new feature. There we go. Everything passed on our check. And now we could actually merge that for, now we have UK English in the Greetings API. And see, now that that's merged, we can see that this issue should also be closed because our PR was merged. So we've got the whole flow again. Yeah, so check out this code. I'll update the README with like steps on how this was implemented, and make sure to come check out the Discord to see how you could build something like this yourself as well. Thanks.